Este episodio está patrocinado por Guardians of Human Rights Foundation. Haciendo de los derechos humanos una realidad global. Nuestra misión es capacitar a los miembros de las comunidades en sus derechos individuales y universales. Dona ahora, ofrece una mano amiga. Invierte en un futuro mejor para todos al donar hoy. Los derechos humanos son para todos.
Hello and welcome. We're here in Allapattah, Florida at the Spinello Projects, and I am surrounded by these wonderful pictures and actually paintings. I'm sorry, these paintings by Jared McGriff. Jared, thank you for inviting us and for opening the doors of Spinello Projects and to come and interview you.
Of course, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So your career is out from the ordinary because you started as an architect and then you go to business, finance, to then become this bold artist that has been very successful, exhibiting in various museums at the NSU in Fort Lauderdale, ICA in Miami, Norton Museum, and many more venues, and having a very strong career. So this is a wonderful interview. So let's start diving into from architecture into finance, and now encountering your soul in the art.
Right, yeah, definitely. I started my career in studying architecture. Actually, I never had a chance to practice, but in the study of architecture, I think I was able to learn a lot about how people interact with space, and through architecture, I was able to have a better understanding of my perspective on how people construct space and how people use space, and I think this influenced my work. I was educated in architecture at a time where drawing was very important, and that's actually what drew me to that study. So while I was working on my hand and studying architecture, I explored a lot with presenting my works in watercolor. So I did a lot of my elevations and plans, the final presentations were in watercolor and pencil, or watercolor and ink, and I think that's where I began to develop some of the sensibility around palette and use of line and composition and some of the things that we see in the paintings today. Over time, I began to paint more so out of I would call it a personal need. It was a personal practice of mine to create work, especially in watercolor. It was very fast, and I was able to receive sort of instant gratification with making works quickly in the time I had. And over time, through that was mostly in the realm of building out, sketchbooks. I did that in sketchbooks and works on paper. And over time, I began to paint and bring that work to canvas. So that's really where we are today. That my work today is an extension of that previous practice.
Wow, but by reading your story and also having, before this recording started, we talked a little bit that then you went from first University of Berkeley going to architecture, then you finished and go to an MBA and end up in the world of finance.
Right, yeah.
So how this shift, architecture to business?
Yeah, I mean, it was really something where my curiosity is what drove me toward the field of finance, and I was able to practice in that field for a period of time, and I realized I wanted to more focus on the arts. So that's what I was doing in a lot of my free time when I was working in that field, and I began to focus more so on making art in a more full-time manner during that time period. So it was, I find that, the study of business, even architecture to an extent, these are these are actually social sciences. These are studies around how people make decisions, how people work together, how organizations function, and in a broader sense, how societies function and develop in a way. Studying architecture was a way to learn about these things over time. Through architecture, I learned a great deal about art, actually. I learned a great deal about how societies formed over time. In the study of business, there was some of these same understandings came through in terms of how organizations function over time and how people make decisions at scale. And I think all of these things are related to the work that I create today, in that my work isn't about a particular person. These works are all created from imagination. So I think I've used all of my experience in thinking about how people interact with each other, how people interact with their environment, and some of the things that people go through and the experiences that people have as units, as groups of people, and also as individuals. And these things all sort of funnel into my work, and they give me a lot of material in terms of how I construct these scenes and how these vignettes come to bear. It's really through thinking about things through that lens, through these kinds of studies of people interacting together over time.
Wow, this is a 360-degree artist that his research starts in first understanding what is composition, then what are organizational structures, and you bring all that experience into your research and then you make it into art. This is, I don't know if someone has told you, probably many times you have heard this, but this is very powerful because you have a long-standing story of 360, because not also
Sure.
you know about that as a painter, but also you learn business.
Right.
Which in this world, in the art world, is very important. So
True.
This is why I say a 360, because it's very interesting how you blend and you put everything kind of together.
Right.
And then you bring it into this bold, colorful, with their own soul and
Right.
thought-provoking.
Thank you.
So what inspires you into this type of compositions that, like the ones that we're sitting?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, especially the ones that we're sitting in front of now. I mean, I think in some ways that was influenced by my career in finance. I mean, through that exploration, I really began to understand how people think about risk and how risk is managed in a variety of ways. And it made me think a lot about probability, not only the probability of these structured games that we would consider gambling in a casino, but also in terms of the larger scale probabilities around what it's like to be born in this community versus that community, or this country versus another country, and how people mitigate the uncertainty around those circumstances. And I think one of the ways that I wanted to explore this was through, actually creating these vignettes of these structured games, creating these scenarios where people are actually in the scenario of a dealer. This person is sitting between the game player and the house. What is that like, for this person to be a conduit of trust between these two parties? What is it like for a person participating in that game who is managing a variety of decisions and managing a variety of incentives? And what does that look like? And maybe how does that feel? And how is that communicated to someone else? What does it look like when someone is engaged in this game of managing or attempting to harness nature to get what they need out of it, and managing those uncertainties and those probabilities, articulated through the practice of fishing, That's something that I see every day in Miami. People fish informally, just off the bridges, and you can find a canal or river anywhere where people are fishing daily. You see this, so it's something that I see on a daily basis, and it really made me think about this notion of harnessing nature and the probabilities in those scenarios, and what does that look like compared to managing the uncertainty and the risk and probability in these structured games. Here we're thinking about the casino, but there's other structured games that we could consider as a deep part of our lives, and this is whether it's hierarchies in society, the economy. These are things that are constructed, that we've made as a society, that people have to deal with these uncertain circumstances to manage their lives on a daily basis. So these are the things that I think about, and these are the things that drive the paintings. And in each work, I attempt to, I start very abstract. My work is abstract in that nature, where it starts a lot with mark making and sketching. It's very drawing based, and then with each work I then try to create a scenario where I'm actually getting some sort of resonance with the character. Some sort of connection with the character begins to build, and there begins to perhaps develop a storyline, perhaps develops, and then I continue to go along with whatever that story is to me. So I think that some people, might view a work through their own lens, with their own life experience, and it may be completely different than someone else, and maybe different from my intention or my perspective. But hopefully there is some sort of connection with viewing that work with various individuals. So that's one of the things that I attempt to do with creating these vignettes and these stories.
Okay, cool. Now this is a question that I must make, and I need to make it in Spanish, because coming from West Coast, Los Angeles to Miami, a tomar cafecito.
Sí.
Entonces, ¿has aprendido a tomar café y hablar un poquito de español acá en Miami?
Sí. Yo aprendo español porque yo vivo en Miami por 6 años. Entonces es necesario para hablar en español.
Very, very good. So now let me go into the other question that now we can switch to English. Does the influence of the painters and the peers that you had in LA, and now from moving to a Miami art scene, both are completely different. Miami during times like Art Basel is very busy and hectic, and LA. What has your paintings been transformed or has been influenced by being here in Miami?
Yeah, so I moved to Miami from Oakland, California, and that's where, in the Bay Area, is where I started to make more strides toward understanding what I was doing as a painter. And in that area, I didn't have as much of a peer group in terms of painters who were striving to present work in places like Art Basel or the surrounding art fairs. So when I moved to Miami, I began to have more of a peer group of painters. There's a lot of great painters in Miami. So it's been really cool to explore the scene here in that way, and have more of a community of artists who are making work where they're attempting to have a greater audience than their own backyard. Miami, of course, is very transitory in some ways. There's a lot of artists from Latin America, from the Caribbean, other places. So it's been really interesting, and I think it's influenced my work in that, just being here in Miami, the palette has been influenced. The Caribbean environment of the tropics in a way that has influenced my work, as well as being around these other artists who are from other places and other communities and communities in Miami as well. I think it's made my work more vibrant, and it's brought another lens to my work, and it's folded in with all of the other experiences I've had of living in Los Angeles, I grew up in rural California. That's a big part of the palette of my work as well. So all of these things kind of blend together to create, some of the landscapes that we see and some.
So you went to do a residency in Suriname.
Yeah, and that's where like a lot of these works about like the water landscapes come in, because it's the river is very important there, especially in the villages and the Maroon communities, where I went with the Maroon community for one weekend only. Mostly I was in the city, but yeah, so that was influenced by that.
Okay,
yeah.
That was a painting that I started looking at. I was drawn into it because that could be also here in the Everglades,
for sure.
And you can see the body of water, and is what I was saying before, that your paintings make you handle the space in a way that you can go inside and dive into
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
So now let's dive into another question, which is the current exhibition that you have in Los Angeles. Let's talk about the Belmeter exhibition. Sorry, you will correct me how it's pronounced. The Stakes Are Myself.
Sure.
That name is just loaded. Tell me a lot about that body of work and what is it?
Sure. So that body of work is an extension of what I was discussing earlier around this idea about how people manage, probability and how they manage the uncertainty in their lives. So those works, it's about 9 works. They explore this notion of people involved in games of, structured games, as well as these games of nature wherein people are fishing and gambling. So the title, The Stakes Are Myself, comes from a poem by Diane de Prima, who was a beat poet. And the beat poets were something that I was influenced by in architecture school, actually. We read a lot of the beat poets in architecture through a few of our professors who were associated with that movement in some ways. So because of her background, I was interested in her work, and this particular body of work is called Revolutionary Letters, and the first poem is called The Stakes Are Myself. Revolutionary Letter number 1 is actually the name of the poem, and it starts off with that phrase, "The stakes are myself." And Diane de Prima wrote this at a time where the United States was in much upheaval around the Vietnam War, and I think we're at a similar time where the world is in a variety of upheavals. And the point of that work of hers was about how the revolution or change in terms of society, as well as an individual, is dependent on the individual to execute that change. So it's not about depending on another institution or someone else or another group of people. All of these changes start with the individual and the individual understanding their own consciousness, and the individual deciding to not be a passive participant in their lives, so to speak. So I thought that was an interesting allegory and an interesting parallel to the works that I was working on, in that in each of these vignettes and scenarios, we have people who are making decisions or creating scenarios for themselves.
Wow, you just draw me into another field, which is the importance of how art in today, or as it has been throughout the history of the world, how powerful and how important is the art that it becomes also a tool it's a tool of beauty, but
Right.
it's a tool of transformation.
Right.
So you just said in the current times that we are. So how can you present to your audience, the people that look at your paintings, what you show also behind this?
Right. So I think it's, in the work itself, it's often, difficult to articulate a specific, point of view. I think what is important is this understanding that, yes, art is a tool, and what I want to do is hopefully in the works get people to think about themselves in various environments, and think about themselves in society in a way, and maybe in those thoughts become some of the questions about certain structures and hierarchies, and maybe that's what I'd like to leave people with, is this idea around what is their understanding of themselves within these scenarios, within these environments, whether it's a physical environment or an environment of society structure, a hierarchy maybe. Maybe it's time to question certain things around these hierarchies or structures. So that's something that I think about in the work, and yes, I think art functions as can be in some ways it can be an act of resistance, in that it's not especially from the artists themselves. Artists are participating in attempting to think about how their own view is of a particular thing versus how society wants them to think about something, or how a religion wants them to think about something. An artist is bringing their own perspective to the table, and that in and of itself could be an act of resistance, or in some ways a political act, in that they're not acting on behalf of a state entity or some other organization. So maybe the work is a nod in that direction for the audience.
Talking about the sociology about the work and what it transmits, your work is also kind of a spiritual. It's like you're showing something bigger, that there is something behind powerful. So what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I think the people mention that to me often, actually, and I think that there's something there. I hope that people see something in the work that is bigger than themselves, and I think with me in particular, that's one of the threads around bringing nature so much into my work. My work is, there's a lot of imagined landscapes, and in that way, it's sort of this, connection to the broader existence, and it's a connection to something that we experience on a daily basis that has nothing to do with ourselves on a daily basis, if you know what I mean. So what we're, I grew up in rural California near the giant sequoias. So these are the oldest trees in the world, the largest trees in the world, the oldest trees in the world. So I often think about, and I grew up thinking about this idea of this expansive notion of time, and how we experience these ancient grounds. We're on this ancient earth. We're able to interact with things that go far beyond us and existed well prior to us, and we're here for only a moment to experience these things and experience them with each other. So how do we take advantage of that moment in time, and what does it mean to participate in that moment of time? How can we potentially lean on some of these elements to guide our thoughts and our activities and our actions versus some of the structures and hierarchies that society has bound us by? So I think in some ways, perhaps that's a spiritual notion or a spiritual idea but it's definitely, I think when I think about my work and I think about the nature that I try to embed in the work, it's about how I experience this nature and how nature helps me think about the expansiveness in time, and it really extracts me from a specific moment in time and a specific place in time and connects me to something larger. So I hope I communicate that in the work, and people are able to receive that in whichever lens they do, you know. So I think these things are all sort of, you know, they're idiosyncratic. Each individual has their own way to receive this, and I think it's interesting, and I'm thankful and humbled that people see that in the work.
Okay, cool. And something that people currently are asking me, because sometimes they feel that we that are in the art world, we don't enjoy other pleasures or sports and things. So are Lakers, what are Miami Heat, what are we talking? Let's talk a little bit about sports. What sports do you like? Baseball, football?
Yeah, so I am a fan of basketball. I actually, I was at the court this morning. I shoot hoops just, you know, casually. And I do follow the NBA as a Laker fan.
Okay.
You know, so.
And do you like to come to the Heat sometimes?
Yeah, I've definitely been to watch the Heat several times, and it's something that I look forward to. I try to watch a couple games every season, you know, because I like watching live basketball. The game is very fast, and you know, professional basketball is extremely impressive in terms of how the athletes are true masters of their craft. So, like, you know, some of the boxers in the paintings that I've done, and I look at sports as through this lens of mastery, and this lens of people achieving contributions to something that's beyond them in that same way. So I think it's very special to watch live sports and professional sports, because these athletes are, you know, they're playing a game that athletes have played for years and years and generations, and they're that one person who's attempting to show their contribution to it and how they uniquely contribute to this practice. So yeah, this idea of sports is definitely something that I really
any
look
inspiring
into.
names that we can tell of athletes that really have marked your kind of, you can say, these artists, this sport athlete, I like it?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a Laker fan in the moment now, I mean, we would have to look at LeBron James' career as someone who has, you know, definitely an example of master in the craft. And it's very interesting that his career has lasted so long, and he had the spotlight on him since he was very young, and he actually lived up to the hype in a lot of ways. And it's cool to see his career now that he's aging and he's still keeping up with the younger players and still making his mark on the game. So it's
as a mentor.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
And now, from sports to music.
Yeah.
What do you like to hear?
Yeah.
What music?
Yeah, so music has always been important to me. So lately, I've been listening to a lot of, you know, funk from the '70s. You know, Sly Stone recently passed away, and I was a huge fan of his work, being from the Bay Area and from California. The whole, you know, the genre of funk was it had a big impression on me. It was the soundtrack to my younger life in some ways, and it influenced hip hop, which was something that was also a huge influence on me. So yeah, I've been just listening to some of that music from the '70s.
And what about being here in Miami? Karol G, reggaeton, merengue, salsa. Tell us about that also, because we in the art world were humans.
Yeah,
we,
for sure.
we like salsa, we like hip hop, we like all this type of arts because those are arts as well.
Exactly.
So tell us, salsa, merengue, reggaeton, any of those, or Karol G, Shakira, what?
So I mean, you know, Miami is one of the things that's cool about Miami, especially when I moved here initially, is like I really felt the vibrance of the community. So when you go around, you hear the salsa and you hear the cumbia, you hear it in the streets, you know. So I think all of this is like a soundtrack to living here. So it's all an influence. Even here in the studio, I hear it at night, you know, especially on the weekends. The neighbors are playing their music, and I can actually hear it in my studio. So a lot of times I'm just listening to their music when I'm making work in the studio.
Because that's part of the sensibility that ends up being in a painting at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's true.
Because when you start hearing this music, you're listening and what the brain is processing. So that influences that how art is how rich.
Exactly.
And it's just to us to give it to our imagination, to create spaces, to be the moments, as you said in the interview, that we're only in this earth for a period of short time. And in these works that we can see, we can get a small piece of time by a great artist. We're here at the studio, and this is the composition of works that Jared had told us about, that is about music, about how the space, the audience. So now we can observe doing the strokes of some of the people of the audience that he is painting right now. So these, Jared, are your new works. This scope of work is about musical instruments, the musical space.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what you're working here in this scope of artworks.
Yeah, so this work, the idea about this work is this idea of performance when the performer is no longer performing. So it's this idea of, you know, what does it look like when there's an audience with no performer, or what does it look like when the performer is no longer performing, when their instrument is put away and they're in this space of rest and reflection, and how does that influence their work? So it's about this idea. Maybe some of the larger ideas are around individuals and managing expectations, and how people are able to manage their own actions in an environment where others expect so much of them.
Wow, it's very nice. I also see a casket.
Yeah,
it's a funeral.
Funeral scene. Yeah, that's something that just, you know, came to me recently. This is a work that's not about the music. It's just a piece that I started working on spontaneously recently, and I think maybe just kind of thinking about you know, some of these situations where people, you know, are experiencing death, and in that there's, you know, maybe there's a celebration or there's a gathering. But at the same time, you know, it's a part of life as well. So it's this, you know, reflecting on this notion.
Okay, very nice. And here are these paintings. Some of these paintings will be available in an art fair in
Houston, the Untitled Art Fair with Spinello Projects.
So
in September.
you can see these artworks with the Spinello Projects in the Untitled Art Fair later on, or you can look at Jared in his Instagram, which is
Watercolor Brother.
Watercolor Brother is his Instagram, a very talented artist, and now we are honored to have it here in Miami. So thank you for inviting us to your studio. It has been a wonderful experience, and from what I heard, and these are news, he is relocating to a new studio. Is that publicly? Can we tell about it?
No, I'm good. Don't
So
keep that private.
We're gonna keep it private, but more upcoming things are gonna come with Jared. Not only in his exhibitions, he always have things kept secret because I see that museums, things, and he's very quiet. So that's a very good. So lots of success to you. Good luck, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.